Yup, welcome back to the channel, and today you find me upon my Royal Enfield Scram 411, and I pose a general question, which is, pound for pound, dollar for dollar, is this about the best year-round, all-round bike that you can buy? Now then, if you're like me, of course, as the longer nights and shorter days and poorer weather of autumn and winter kick in, you start to get a little bit depressed about the fact that your riding opportunities are probably a little bit constrained. And so it was when I decided to swap my big luxury touring motorcycle for 3 Royal Enfields, that in addition to an Intercept and a Classic 350, I wanted this, a Scram 411, ostensibly so that I can ride year round. The general caveat to that is that obviously there are certain weather conditions in which you really can't ride whatever bike you've got, and that would of course be ice and snow. But the rest of the time, if the worst you're going to have thrown at you is wind and rain, then you want a bike that can cope. So at some point I'll stop and do the walk around as usual, and I'll give you some of the technical specs of this bike. But I'll start by saying, for £4,500 sterling, you get an awful lot. You're getting basically a 411cc omni capable, off-road capable scrambler stroke urban adventure bike. Basically a bike that will do both. So this has all the advantages of a modern 250 kilo plus adventure machine, if you discount all that electronic nonsense, although she does have ABS. You're getting the equivalent for a third or a quarter of the price. Brand new. And that's a very, very strong argument to try and counter, unless you're a bit snobbish about the bikes that you're prepared to be seen riding. And I suppose if your only motivation is about how you are seen riding, then I'd question I would certainly question your motorcycling motives, but anyway, that's for another day. So for me, it's about the enjoyment of the ride, and in the case of this bike, prolonging those opportunities to ride for as long as possible through the autumn and winter months. So we're now in the middle of October, and the weather is starting to change. It's getting colder and it's getting a little bit wetter, as you could probably see from the road surface, albeit that we've got a beautiful blue sky today and no rain forecast. So what about this bike then, Royal Enfield Scram 411? Well, you're probably aware it's a derivative of the Royal Enfield Himalayan, or Himalayan. In fact, its full name is the Himalayan 411 Scram, but it's trimmed back into a more of a scrambler orientated design. But it's a very light bike, it's a very manoeuvrable bike. It's returning between 80 and 90 miles per gallon with a 15 litre fuel tank. It's got off-road, semi-off-road tyres on, Seat Indian make, perfectly good. I fitted crash bars, I fitted a rear rack, and in due course I'll be fitting hard quote-unquote ammo box style luggage. So in terms of a practical all year round bike, I'd suggest they don't come any better. Now I know people say, don't they, well, it's only a single, it's only 411cc, and it's only 24 brake horsepower, 32 newton meters of torque. Well, you could crunch the numbers all day long. Let me tell you, for 99% of the riding I do, certainly, this bike, even though it's in stage 2 of the running in process, which effectively limits me most of the time to 50 miles an hour, 99% of the time this bike absolutely fulfills all my expectations of it. And for £4,500, how much more can you ask of a bike? I mean, it's even got built-in tripper navigation that links in with the Royal Enfield app on your phone and works pretty well for me. So let's have a look. I mean, if you were thinking of, right, I want a bike that I can comfortably and confidently ride the year round, what would you be thinking of? Well, first thing for me is not spending a fortune, for the simple reason that lots of aspects of riding are compromised through the winter months. Certainly the effects of the weather and the potential for corrosion, and also the fact that I suppose the heavier and more unwieldy the bike is, the more prone it is likely to be to shall we say, an element of destabilisation in bad conditions if you hit a little patch of ice or something like that inadvertently. So I think the fact that this is 185 kilograms or thereabouts wet, the fact that it's all the engine cases are powder coated black, so they're not like the exposed polished metal casings on the Interceptor and the Classic 350, and for that matter other modern classic motorcycles. They are powder coated black, so less opportunity for corrosive elements to set in bad weather, particularly when salt goes down on the road. So there's that one. There's also the fact that it is only £4,500, and I don't know about you, but the prospect of dropping any bike isn't particularly appealing. However, and I know this to my cost, if I had to choose between dropping a £20,000 bike and dropping a £4,500 bike, I know which one it would be. Because you do more damage dropping a big one, and pound for pound you'd be paying more for repairs. I speak from experience. That bike being a K1600 GTL. Think about dropping that like I did. £2,500 that cost me several years ago. So that's another reason. Another good reason is, as I've just alluded to, the fuel economy on this bike is outstanding. So one thing you don't want to be doing, or I certainly don't want to be doing any more than I have to through autumn and winter, is stopping and starting and fueling up. So this has a 15 litre fuel tank, and it's returning between 80 and 90 miles to the gallon, and that's an easy, if my maths is correct, 250 mile range to a tank. And limiting your number of petrol stops if the weather's bad is a good call from my perspective. So yeah, the question is it a bike for all seasons, a man for all seasons? Well, of course that expression means somebody that's capable of dealing with any situation, and as I've said, bar extreme weather conditions, this bike can do it. It's so light, it's so manoeuvrable, it's so well laid out in terms of its overall rugged construction, and it can be so extensively accessorized that this is one very easy bike to adapt to winter riding. And I feel more confident on this bike at this time of year than I've ever felt previously. And I've had adventure bikes. I've had a BMW R1200 GS Adventure, I've had Honda VFR 1200X Cross Tourer, and I've had a KTM 1290 Super Adventure, KTM 890 Adventure. I've read, owned and ridden plenty of adventure bikes, and beyond a shadow of a doubt I feel far more confident on this bike than ever I was on any of those, which sort of says it all. And if there is to be such a thing as a modern classic semi-off-road do-it-all stroke commuter bike stroke scrambler, then I suppose this would be it. The only other one I can really think about with retro influences is the Moto Guzzi V85 TT, which costs nearly 3 times as much as this bike. So there's an issue. Now let me touch again upon running in. If you watch my video on the Royal Enfield Classic 350, you'll know that running in these Royal Enfield singles is a bit of a pain in the backside because of the rail constraints in terms of speed for each gear, particularly during the first part of the running in process. So there's a table in the book, I'll just give you a clip of it here. There's a table in the handbook that tells you, because there isn't a rev count, it tells you what your maximum speed should be in each gear, and it's really low. Up to 300 mile service it's really low and quite difficult, particularly if you live in a hilly area like this. This bike's had its first service, so I'm now in the second stage of the running in process, and it's far more usable. That is an issue because stage 2 of the running in process goes up to 1200 miles or 2000 kilometers. So yeah, if there is any sort of downside to these Royal Enfield singles, it's the running in, and I'm not entirely sure what, if anything, can be done about that. It's an old school engine, you can probably hear, it's quite agricultural, but it certainly does the job. So let's talk about the riding experience then. Well, the suspension is more than adequate. This particular road I'm on now, it's called York Gate, goes up onto Otley Shevin, and it's about the most undulating road surface anywhere on the planet. Certainly in this county. And it's a real test of any suspension setup, and it's coping admirably. I mean, obviously I'm bouncing about, but you bounce about on any bike up here. And I've certainly not found any issues with the suspension at all. It feels planted at the front, planted at the rear. There is a preload adjustment on the rear, no adjustment on the front. And the front suspension, I mean, it's got less fork travel than the Himalayan. This has only got 190 millimeters of front fork travel, but it's more than enough, and it would absolutely lap up all but the most challenging of off-road routes. So suspension is great. The seat's really comfortable. probably one of the most comfortable that I've actually ridden, and the seating position is it's a fairly standard 90 degree down to 45 degree at the leg, and by that I mean a 45 degree body to thighs, sorry, 90 degree body to thighs and 45 degrees at the knee. That's the sort of riding position on this bike. And so we're cruising along now on this helter-skelter of a road at just short of 50 mile an hour, and it's absolutely steady as a rock, and the road surface is wet. And so these Seat semi-knobbly tyres coping really well with the conditions. So if you can find anywhere a bike that ticks all of those boxes for £4,500, let me know in the comments below. I can't immediately think of one. As I say, I'm going to fit some hard luggage to this, Royal Enfield branded. I don't know if it's made by Jivy or not, but it looks like Jivy luggage. Not cheap either, has to be said. Not cheap at all. Oh, they're the right cock up there. So yeah, it's a really convincing message, this bike, as far as I'm concerned. It looks the part, the design's spot on, the usability is as easy as it gets. I just go into the garage, unplug the Optimate, wheel this bike out, and I'm away. And I don't have to worry about whether the weather's going to frustrate my plans or whether the terrain's going to frustrate my plans or anything of that nature, because I know this bike can handle it. And I know if the worst comes to the worst, God forbid, fingers crossed, and I do drop it at 185 kilos wet, I'm going to be picking it up in short order, no problem whatsoever. And with the crash bars on, the engine bars that I've got on this bike, I'm pretty confident it would be come back upright intact, shall we say. So what a fantastic bike for the money. Comes in a number of colour schemes. Two of the colour schemes are premium, of which this is one. So the white and red, that's another 100 quid I think, and this one, the Spirit Silver with turquoise, is another £100. But the other colours basically are grey with the little donuts on the side here, colour coded in. There's one in blue, one in red, one in yellow, and there's a couple of colour schemes that don't seem to be available in the UK, including a nice blue one for some reason. But anyway, those are your choices, but I like the look of this one. So the bike came from Robinson's of Rochdale, Moto GB dealer. Great experience dealing with them. Thank you, Nick and the crew there. Big shout out to you. For some reason there was a Royal Enfield dealership just down the road from me in Shipley, about 3-4 miles away from where I am in Bingley. But they've shut shop. It looks like they've moved to Tadcaster. So but my servicing gets done by a local independent, and that's Archie's Motorcycles of Hollings Hill, between Shipley and Guiseley. Top fella. Even has a little scooter you can borrow while your bike's been attended to. So of course, when it comes to the services on these Royal Enfields, whether the twins or the singles, that includes checking and, if necessary, adjusting the tappets. It's a tank off job. That requires the bike to be cold, essentially. So you know, they do need the bike for the best part of half a day, so it's very convenient that the Archies you can borrow the little twist and go scooter. I don't know what else we haven't really talked about here, really. It's simplicity itself. You get a good old-fashioned speedo there, analog speedo in miles per hour and kilometres per hour. You get a clock, which is great because there isn't one on the Interceptor, and that's a pain in the backside. But you get a clock, you get a gear indicator, which you also don't get on the Interceptor. It's a 5-speed gearbox, so it's nice to know what gear you're in, isn't it? And then you get the trip meter, which is adjusted by this here button here. So all that button does is cycles you through trip A, trip B, and the odometer reading. And if you press and hold it for 5 seconds, it will zero the trip meters. Something I always do, notwithstanding the fact that there is a perfectly good fuel gauge there. Right, so yeah, what a cracker. This will be my go-to bike over the next few months till we get back into biking season, and I can't imagine anything more suited to the job. Like I say, at some point I'll pull in, I'll do a walk around for you, and I'll talk you through the specs. So, to talk about the brakes, well, I think the best description I can come to is adequate. If you're used to, you know, the really keen, biting braking ability of something like a sports bike or a big adventure bike or tourer, these are a little bit different. As I said in the 350 review, you need to get back into the old school of braking, applying both the front and rear brake together, and balancing out the two braking systems, front and rear, because that's where the bulk of your braking comes from. I found that on this bike and on the classic 350 that the rear brake actually feels keener than the front brake. It's only a single disc on the front, but with both brakes applied, shall we say, in a measured way, the braking's perfectly adequate. So yeah, no issue with the brakes whatsoever. Just get into the habit of using front and rear and you'll be absolutely fine. Just absolutely chugs along. I mean, once the revs are up, this single cylinder thumper that has quite a bit of rock and roll about it on idle, but once the revs are up, she just flies along beautifully. Right folks, here she is, Royal Enfield Scram 411, and this colourway is called Spirit Silver, and it's got the very fetching turquoise embellishments there. So okay, let's go through the specs of this bike, and hopefully it will shed a little bit more light on my theory that this is probably, pound for pound, one of, if not the best year-round, all-season bikes that money can buy. Okay, so let's start the front with the brakes. It's a single disc up front. You can see the ABS ring there and the ABS sensor, and it's a Bi-Bray, which is a Brembo mark, meaning by Brembo apparently. So it's a Bi-Bray twin pot floating caliper on that 300mm single disc. And if we go around to the rear, we have a 240mm, again you can see the ABS ring there, 240mm disc with a single piston, single pot Vibray caliper. Okay then, so the front suspension, they are 41mm diameter forks with 190mm of travel, so that's slightly shorter than the Himalayan itself. Not adjustable in any way, shape or form, but perfectly adequate for the job. Front wheel is a 19-inch front spoked wheel with tubes. It's an Indian make, CEAT, C-E-A-T, but I found they're absolutely excellent on just about any road service, and they really handle well in both the wet, which it has been, as you can probably see this morning, and the dry. And the rear tyre is a 17-inch, and again the CEAT make semi-knob is there at the back. Okay, the bash plate on here comes as standard with the bike. However, the Royal Enfield engine bars, which you can see fitted here, are an accessory which I fitted. As I mentioned during the earlier commentary, as you can see, all the engine cases are powder coated black. So not like the classic 350 and the Interceptor, where they are polished steel or polished aluminium if you choose to polish it. These far less vulnerable to the adverse effects of weather. So perfect finish on an engine for riding through winter for sure. So the engine itself is a single cylinder, single overhead cam 4-stroke engine. It has 24 brake horsepower and 32 Newton meters of torque. And let me tell you, that torque actually comes in very low down the rev scale. So the thing with this bike is it's short shifting really. It's surprising how quickly you can get up to 5th gear and still have plenty of tractability from the engine. It's a great engine. It sounds quite agricultural, but it's a really strong performer. So if we take a look at the exhaust, now nothing special here, and I think it sounds okay really, but as you can see it gets a fair patina on it after a short time. Or a slightly sepia tint going on there, in spite of the fact that I have actually coated this exhaust with Silcoline Pro Prep. So I may at some point go for the Lextech exhaust, because I've got Lextech cans on the Intercept and they sound absolutely awesome. As you can see, double swinging arm suspension at the back, and a chain drive with the monoshock you can see there, the rear of the bike. Now, so it's a 5-speed gearbox, 1 down 4 up. It's quite snickety. I've not found any false neutrals yet, to be honest with you. Bit of a technique to get it into neutral, but once mastered, not forgotten. Very straightforward indeed. The fuel tank here, this is a 15-litre fuel tank. So at something like between 80 and 90 miles per gallon, you can see how you can probably easily get about 250 miles range out of this tank. So let's have a look at the switch gear. Very, very straightforward indeed. Obviously your run switch, kill switch, these are for the hazard warning lights, and of course the starter underneath. And then this button here is to cycle through the trip meters and odometer. You have your high low beam headlight control there, your pass light, your indicator light and the horn underneath. If we fire her up, As you can see, the traditional analog display there, which gives you the time, the mileage, and there you are, the trip meter, and also a gear indicator. So you get your neutral indicator here, and you get your gear indicator there, because we're in neutral, so it's showing 0. Tripper navigation, which works off the Royal Enfield app and works quite well. And what else can we say about this bike? Well, let's have a listen. There you go. That very typical thump of a single cylinder. As you can hear, it's got a nice tractor-like clatter to it. But as I've said, it's a very, very strong tractable engine. It sounds pretty cool. The mirrors are functional. The design's a little bit quirky. And you've got to laugh at that, haven't you? Objects in the mirror are closer than they appear. Yeah, no shit, Sherlock. I put grip puppies on here as well. I've got grip puppies on all my Royal Enfields because they make a real difference to the comfort when riding. Okay, I think that's it. I don't think I've missed anything. Right, so I hope that review was of some use for you. As I've said in past videos, if you've watched them on the Royal Enfields, there's a certain character of riding that goes with these bikes which is hard to put into words. It just takes you right back to those halcyon days of British motorcycling in the 50s and 60s. And when you take into account the fact that you can pick up bikes like this for less than £5,000, brand new, with a 3-year warranty, it becomes a very, very easy sell indeed. And no surprise that these things are practically flying off the shelves. And let's face it, in these constrained times, bikes returning 70, 80, 90 miles to the gallon, costing under £5,000 to buy, and coming with 3 years comprehensive warranty, are a real attraction. So from Nidderdale in the heart of Yorkshire, hope that review's been of some use to you. If it has, please click a like, please click a subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. And until then, ride safe and be kind. See you later. Eddie, Eddie, hello boy, Eddie. Eddie, 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 Eddie.